I'm super excited to have Kedrick Armstrong today in this interview. And I've been reading just your background, all the work that you've done, but I would love for you to kind of recap and just tell me, like, just career-wise and just
Yeah.
resume-wise, what you've done musically and artistically. So.
Yeah. So thanks so much for having me. I'm so excited to be a part of this. I'm originally from South Carolina. I'm a Southern boy at heart, and moved to the Chicagoland area in 2012 to attend Wheaton College. So I did
Hmm.
my bachelor's in music history at Wheaton College. And upon graduating, I joined the Chicago Sinfonietta and their Project Inclusion Conducting program. And this is a program that is built to kind of help diverse Black, Indigenous, people of color conductors get into the field. So it's a training program for diverse conductors. And it was a great experience. It has led me to work with Lyric Opera. I'm music supervisor for a project they do called Empower Youth.
Hmm.
That is very similar to this program. We work with about 30 kids from the South Side every year and kind of a show from scratch alongside the young people. I also work at a Presbyterian church full-time as a music director out in the suburbs, and freelance as a conductor and music director throughout Chicago. So my schedule is extremely flexible and insane, but I work full-time as a musician, which is what I've always wanted to do. So I am super grateful for that.
Sure. And just so I know, how many instruments do you play? How many different instruments do you?
Yeah, so piano is my first instrument. I started on piano when I was about 6 or 7,
Hmm.
and then switched to clarinet when I was in 6th grade. But throughout my entire kind of musical life, piano and clarinet are the main ones. I've also played cello, viola, violin. I marched euphonium and marching band for 2 years.
Wow.
So I've done lots of different instruments, but piano and clarinet are the two main ones.
Yeah. So as a farmer, so I grew up in a little Baptist church, so the storefront Baptist church, and I started on piano, and my background is church organist. So I played
Mm,
organ. I became the church musician at 13 along with my siblings. So that's my background. And I'm bringing this up because it was told to me that piano is kind of like a good foundation and basis for other instruments, like kind of
yeah,
once. I mean, I don't know how that translates into like clarinet and like horns and those types of instruments, but I was told that once you learn piano, like it kind of is the basis for everything. Like you could kind of easily learn other instruments. Would you say that's true, like in your experience, or is it different?
yeah. I would definitely say it's true. Piano gave me a lot of basics and foundations in playing, and I think one of the big things is right the independence of hands. Right, as a pianist, as a church musician, like your hands have to be able to do different things at different times,
Hmm.
and training those muscles at an early age, or just getting that training on piano first is super helpful. The learning how to read music and kind of the foundations of theory. To your point, I actually had two teachers growing up. I had my teacher who taught me how to read music and play scales and do kind of the classical thing. And I also had a mentor who taught me how to play in church, which playing in a Black church is a very different experience and
Yes.
set of skills.
Oh
So
yeah.
I had two teachers growing up who kind of helped me navigating that. But I would say both of those teachers and experiences definitely helped me into the music that I do now.
So I want to read something that I read in your background in your bio, um, and this it says, as a conductor, you strive to take your deep passion for music and combine spiritual sensibility with historical inquiry to create an avenue for musical expression and connection between ensemble and audience. And one of my first questions is just as a composer, what are like a couple of songs that inspire you or comfort you and kind of challenge you? Like, how do you bring all those things together? Because you have
Yeah.
that experience and that background. How do you bring those things together? Like, what kind of inspires you?
Yeah, this has been such a fun project, just kind of going through the musical brain space. And there are three actually. I have three inspires, and I'll talk briefly. The first one is actually a song by H.T. Burleigh, who is a Black classical composer
Mhm.
who lived between 1866 and 1949. And I recently found out about H.T. Burleigh and doing research, and it inspires me because I think oftentimes when we talk about music and classical music, it's a very white Eurocentric conversation.
Mhm.
And he wrote these songs called the Five Songs of Lawrence. Let's see, Lawrence Hope. Um, and they're art songs essentially. And what inspires me so much is you have a Black man kind of, at the turn of the century writing classical art songs. And it was something that I never really knew about. And so every time I listen to those, I'm like, wow, Black people have always been doing classical music. And that gives me so much hope as I navigate spaces. Another song is For Every Mountain by Kurt Carr.
Oh yeah, classic, classic. Yes.
Classic. And
Mhm.
I think that song speaks to everything that is gospel music, right? Everything that you love about gospel music is in that
Mhm.
song. And in the roughest times of my life, you can put that song on and it's like, okay, we good, let's do this, let's go. But I think there's so much kind of musical depth, right? If you peel back that song, there's so much theory and there's so much history in that song that can be studied and analyzed. And I think it speaks to the complexity of gospel music,
Mhm.
that is that we love so much, right? It's so healing and speaks to us so personally, but it's also like hard, right? Pulling off that song is very tricky, but I think that's what I love about gospel music so much, is it shows the complexity
Mhm.
of Black spirituality.
Right. Speaking of history, so with our students, one of the things I like to do, I'll play popular artists, for instance, hip hop artists from a certain time period, for instance, Tupac, and I'll kind of put the lyrics up and have them go through the lyrics and
Mm,
kind of decipher what it means, but also, context, like what was happening at that time, or what do you think
right.
unfolded in his life that led him to say that. I've had the pleasure of reading slave narratives, and one of the things that they noticed in relation to like spirituality, they noticed that they were able to draw inspiration when they would read the stories of like the times of like the Exodus and the Israelites leaving Egypt, drawing
Yeah,
inspiration from that, and then being able to formulate their own songs and from that, and just
wow.
gaining hope, that one day they would be free. Can you talk a little bit just about like his history, historical context, and how that even plays a role in music, how you relate to it and interpret it?
Yeah, I think it is one of my biggest, I mean, as like you read in that statement, it's one of my biggest passions.
Hmm.
Is the history behind music, which is why I was a music history major. And I think for me, what it does is it humanizes a composer. It humanizes the people who write the music.
Hmm.
I often go back to the history, the lived experience to give you insight into the mind of the composer, because oftentimes we're writing songs of hope and joy out of places of deep pain,
Hmm.
and knowing that changes the way you communicate that joy and that hope, right? It's
Hmm.
one thing to write a song that's happy because you are happy. It's another thing to write a song about happiness when you don't see it in yourself, right?
Hmm.
And it translates differently to an audience. And I think studying that history, humanizing composers, getting to know their roots, their intentions, makes the performance, the reception of the music all the more powerful. Which is why I think you can't separate it, right? You can't talk about
Hmm.
a composer or a song and not look back on what they were going through at the time, because you don't get the full picture.
Right. would you consider yourself a musician and a poet? Would you say that there's poetry in your music? Do you separate the two, or are those two intertwined for you?
It's a both and I think that's what's crazy about being an instrumentalist, is because I work equally with music that doesn't have words as I work with music that does have words. But I think the approach is the same. When you work with words and when you're dealing with text and language, so much more is apparent, and it's about how the two fit, right? I'm often looking at how music enhances language and how language enhances music. I'm looking at the relation of the two, and you're always trying to judge what is more important, right? What am I trying to highlight? Am I trying to make the music fit into the text? Or am I just like, is this text so important that the music has to work around it? Which is an interesting relationship, and it really makes you think about and dialogue with that conversation so much more. But when you're dealing with music that doesn't have text, there's a lot you can say, and you almost have to be even more particular, even more conscientious about what you say, right? Because there is no words. And I think there has to be this level of removal when you're dealing with music without words, because everyone is going to interpret it differently, right? And I think when I'm writing music and there's no text involved, there's sort of this removal that you have to have when you put it out in the world, because I know what I want it to be and I know what I've meant it to be, but there is this beauty that happens when other people engage with their music and they see different things in it. And that also can be extremely powerful.
Yeah. And lastly, just speaking of putting things out into the world, what do you want your music to speak into the world?
I am always trying to find the line between comforting and challenging the listener. I'm always trying to find that place that says, music is healing, music is community, music is love, music is, food for the soul, and really live in that, and trying to find music that really inspires and comforts people. But I also, some of my greatest music experiences have been music that pushes me beyond my comfort zone and challenges me as a musician, as a person, as a thought leader. And I mean, I would be remiss to not say, in the middle of such, racial tensions, in the middle of, Black Lives Matter and Black music matters, in this conversation about diversity, I think it is foolish to approach music without thinking of social justice. And I am always thinking about how music can be an avenue for conversation and for change. And that's along the lines of challenging, right? Some of the stuff that we're dealing with, writing, engaging with, isn't pretty. It doesn't make you feel good. It speaks truth to power, but it's powerful, and it can be a part of dialogue and be a part of conversation. And so that's always where I'm living, kind of that in between, where I'm comforting people and dealing with emotions, but also dealing with reality of the world that we're living in, and how to call people to those realities through music.
That's great. Thank you so much for sharing your music and your experience. Where can, for our students who may want to just kind of keep up with you and what you're doing artistically and musically, where can we find you? Do you have a website, or just ways that they can reach out or check out on your stuff?
Yeah, so I have a website, KedrickArmstrong.com. I believe it's up. I'm going to double check, make sure that it's up today. But KedrickArmstrong.com, you can check out my work. Also, I'm on social media, Facebook, Instagram. It's either Kedrick Armstrong or @withkeddy, KEDDY. You can feel free to reach out to me. I'm always loving to talk about music and collaborating and text, so I'm open and available to any further conversations.
Ladies and gentlemen, the wonderful Mr. Kedrick Armstrong. I'm AASHA Francis, your composition of a city teacher and creative, and we are signing off. Thank you.